So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at my process for some of my personal work. So let's get started. I'm going to just show you the final product of an illustration, and then we're going to break it down into all the steps that I took to get there. So this is my fan art piece of Spirited Away. And for that piece, I needed to do a lot more research because I hadn't ever drawn anything from Spirited Away before. And frankly, it was a really good excuse to get to draw all the things that I was really inspired by. So the next few slides are just me getting familiar with the style of Miyazaki and the way he designs characters. I remember when I first drew this one, this is the very first drawing, I was like, oh God, it just does not look good. Not exactly my style, not Miyazaki style, but you know, you soldier on, you're like, okay, I'm gonna do another one. The first one didn't go well, just do another one. So, you know, here's a progression essentially of like getting more comfortable with the drawing. Sometimes you need that warming up stage. And then, you know, the more you do, sometimes you get on a roll and you start to feel better about it. It also can like kind of put you in that state where you're feeling good and the drawing's gonna go better. Really, here is just me kind of pinpointing the parts of Miyazaki's art style that I like, maybe some of the characters that I want to feature in a piece. I will say at this point, I have no idea what the end product is, so there's some characters and costumes that I'm definitely not going to use, but just by drawing them once or twice, I have a sense of like whether it's an option I want to play with. The part I remember really liking was Haku, the dragon character. Just like the way that he looks in the film and how he's just like so cool. Just a little bit scary, but also not like frightening. If there's a feeling that you're going for, practice evoking that feeling. So for me, I remember like this drawing isn't particularly great, but I remember it captured the mood I wanted. And sometimes that's what the exploration and research phase is about. All right, so similarly for this page, I think you can kind of see the direction of like, oh yeah, I think I should have Haku in this piece if I'm going to do a Spirited Away one as a dragon. And there's some exploration of the other characters just because they're cool. And it's like, you know, when you're going through Google Images, you'll see a bunch of random things that throw you off on tangents. Draw the things, draw them all if they strike your fancy. Some additional characters. That research page might even remind you of things that you had forgotten that you're like, maybe this is something I want to draw in the future. You can always refer back to this as research for other drawings that you do. They don't have to all be for the next project. And when I drew the final piece, this is what I used. I didn't like go back to Google Images and like have to scroll through a bunch of different tabs. I had a sketchbook in front of me that I could concretely pick up and be like, oh, that's what the character looks like. This is the angle that I was interested in. It's all there. It's your resource that you've built up. And oddly enough, because you've drawn it before, you're able to kind of take yourself back to understanding what it was. For me, I find that whenever I remember to take this step, because I don't always, but when I do, I'm like, oh, thank God. Like now I can go back and look at what I did previously and replicate it more easily without re-understanding a reference, because the filter that your understanding goes through when you are taking a reference and drawing it in a way that you understand, that's really important. All right, so next, here are some thumbnails for the Spirited Away piece. The first one I did, I was thinking of a horizontal orientation where the main character Sen is in her sleeveless costume. And I just thought it would be cool because I always think seeing the muscles over here is really like informative and interesting. But my problem with this piece was that I wanted to include a lot more characters because I had really enjoyed researching so many and I thought it'd be more fun to include a lot more Easter eggs. So the size of this shot was just too close up for me to be able to accomplish what I wanted. Even though I think it would have been fun, it might have been really cute. But I think with this piece, I was interested in the idea of having the Easter eggs be things that were inanimate objects. So using some symbols and metaphor for other characters or other films within the piece. I ended up doing something very similar for a Totoro piece later. Sometimes that plants an idea. And then the last series of thumbnails is really what I ended up going with. You can see here the initial idea, and I didn't draw the character in the angle that I wanted, and this is just a sketch pad. So I drew her up here, and as I was figuring out the pose, it just drew on top of it. This series of thumbnails is mostly me figuring out the posing of Haku and Sen within the piece, but the composition was pretty set. I wanted the main characters flying over a night market because I had been to Taiwan recently, and there's this night market called Raohe Night Market. And when I was there, I had a very Spirited Away type of experience where one, it's like the beginning of the film where there's like amazing food everywhere and it's kind of that really cool atmosphere. But also, we were there with my wife's parents, and we lost him while we were there, just like at the beginning of the real film. We found the dad within like 10 minutes, so that was fine. But we're searching for her mom for like 45 minutes. And when we found her, she was eating food at a stall. And she was like, oh yeah, I just figured it'd be best if I stayed put. Sometimes this phase of exploration will trigger a memory that inspires you, and you can kind of take it in that direction. Anytime I do a piece, this is a broader piece of advice, I think the more of myself I put into it, the more I connect with it, the more exciting it is for me. And that always translates, I think, to the viewer, whether the artist is having a good time, whether they have a funny inside joke they want to get across, whether there's a story at all. It doesn't have to necessarily be upbeat, like maybe it's dark and more gritty. But in my case, it was channeling how much I enjoyed being at that night market and how it reminded me of Spirited Away. So next step is the line art. For this piece, I do remember just going for it, so there's no like pencil sketch necessarily. My idea for this overall composition is it looks purely like a Spirited Away piece because obviously that's the main focal point here. My goal with it artistically was that I wanted it to be a overall Ghibli piece. So if we look through this night market, almost all the major Ghibli characters make an appearance. My ambition was that it would be a piece where it feels cohesive, but it has everything in it at the same time. A lot of times I've seen other artwork where they try to have all of the Ghibli films together and it kind of looks like a rainbow because all of them have different color palettes that are very iconic and they don't want to touch that. But for me, I was like, I'm going to try to have everything and also bring it together with a really intense color palette. So that was the story behind how I was thinking of the composition, where main characters are very clear and focused and large, and then the rest of them are kind of more of a mosaic. They're more of a texture to the piece that, you know, if you see it from far away, you won't even notice them. But if you are a super fan and you dig deep, you'd find all those other things. So this next step is my flats. I'm already thinking about what I said before, where I want to make the color palette really cohesive on the bottom. For example, on this Mononoke character, her shirt might be blue, but what I'm going to choose instead is just like the darkest value within my palette to be that color. It just so happens that I think I picked a palette, or that Miyazaki happens to choose a lot of colors that more easily lend themselves to that. But that is kind of the puzzle here. If a color needs to be a bright blue, try to squeeze it into the closest next best thing within your palette. That way you're not having to have, like we said before, a million different colors. And similar to what I was saying before, the contrast between the focal point and the background is that she's allowed to be the true to life color because she's going to stand out, and everybody else is this kind of pattern of color, and they all kind of blend together, which is intentional at this stage. So these are flats, there's no lighting or shading yet. Next, I've added in shading and light. So what I ended up doing over here is actually just a highlight pass. So the light in this case helps unify everything because it also just dominates. It's almost like half of the bottom area has become that one light that's cohesive. There's a little bit of a gradient on that light source just because I, within my own personal work, wanted to move the eye towards the center. So having it be brighter in the middle and slightly darker on the edges is what I was playing with. I think when it was just all flat, the one color, these corners kind of were a little bit too loud. So that's what I was playing with. There's a little bit of gradation over here on the hair. I'm starting to hone in with this step what my values are for the overall piece. How much do I want her to pop out versus blend in with the background? Because this was a little bit stark. Now things are starting to come together a little bit. And here's the final version of the piece. What we see compared to this previous one is a lot more crunching down of the color palette to make it cohesive. I think here it felt a little bit disparate to me. I really just wanted this to be all about the nighttime vibe, the way the night market light is kind of the main highlight source of the piece. When you're in that kind of environment, only things that are directly lit by a light source really kind of pop out. So achieving that atmosphere was the main goal from this step to this step. And that meant crunching down everything else to be kind of that middle tone purple. And the line art is really kind of my darkest dark that just defines everything else. I was very happy to kind of achieve the look that I wanted, where this night market scene feels cohesive, has everybody in it, but it just from afar looks like a Spirited Away piece. All right, so that wraps up my process for my personal artwork. If you liked what we did today, you can look at the entire digital course covering how I research a variety of topics with very different techniques. as well as the full process for an illustration from start to finish. And you can find that at proko.com/digital painting.